So we said this number in front affects the amplitude. So just a reminder that the absolute value of A is equal to the amplitude. And then a reminder that the period, I didn't leave enough space here, is equal to 360 over the absolute value of B. And hopefully you're seeing why I put the absolute value by that last curve I put up there. It's possible that A and B are negative, and that doesn't change the amplitude or period. That just changes where the graph maybe starts. This X, you may see it written as a theta today. We see that a lot, okay? And then H is the phase shift. A phase shift is just a horizontal shift. And just a little caveat about that, from way back when we've been doing transformations, when it's with X, it's a liar. So X lies, I'm going to just write that as a reminder, meaning if it's X minus or theta minus something, it actually moves the graph right. And if it's an X plus or theta plus, it actually moves then the graph, no, did I say that backwards? X minus moves it right, X plus moves it left. It's a liar. The K is then our vertical shift, and it's as it seems. Okay, so if it's plus K, then the graph is going to shift up. If it's minus K, the graph is going to shift down. Okay, so for today, when we're deciding our steps for graphing, because like I said, we have a lot of things maybe going on, our step one is we are going to determine the vertical shift. And with that, that vertical shift is going to become our new midline, okay? So we're going to graph the midline. If there is no vertical shift, the midline is just the x-axis. And so far, that's what we've been dealing with. The middle of our graphs have been the x-axis the last 2 days. Number 2. Then I'd like you to determine the amplitude, and from that we're going to graph the max and min, and to do that we're going to use a dashed line, and that's just going to help us see, hey, how high do I need to make my curve and how low do I need to make my curve. That comes from the amplitude. Number 3, we're going to identify the period. And then you're going to go ahead and sketch your graph. The reason why I'm saying sketch your graph is because it's not necessarily the final graph. So I'm going to today, like if there's a last thing, then I'm going to do that with a pencil, and then my final graph with a pen. So the last is then, if there's a phase shift, move the graph left or right. Okay. So as I said, sometimes there's only going to be 1 or 2 of these things going on, but you're going to see, I think, towards the way end. Yeah, I put an example, some examples on there that have multiple things. Okay? So I'll let you make sure you copy that down a minute. I was writing kind of fast. All right, so on the first one, we're going to state the amplitude, period, and phase shift. And the reason I only mentioned those ones is because there is no vertical shift on this one. So first of all, I look at the front. There's nothing there. So what does that mean the amplitude is? Amplitude is 1. And again, if I was graphing this, I would look at the end. You see I have no vertical shift there, okay? So nothing added or subtracted off the end. What that means is if I was doing step 1, my midline is going to be my x-axis because there's no vertical shift. So my amplitude is 1 and -1. So that means that I need my curve to go up to 1 and down to -1. Now, if you want to use a nicer picture, I'm going to use 2 tick marks for 1 for this one. So my graph's going to go up to here. Here's -1, and it's going to go down to here. All right, next we're going to determine the period. Since there's nothing in front of my theta, the period would be 360 divided by 1, or 360. Okay. And then, so do you notice this minus 90 here? So that phase shift is 90 degrees right. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to sketch the graph before the phase shift, and then I'm going to show you how it moves. Okay. So if I put my 1, 2, 3, 4 tick marks on here, and I labeled my axis, that would make the end 360 and each of these 90. And if you want to do this, if you don't have different colors, if you want to do before the phase shift with a dashed line, that's fine. So before the phase shift, this is a normal cosine curve, or normal sine curve. It starts at its middle, it goes up to its top, goes down here. Okay. So real lightly, it's just a sine. That's my sine curve. All right, so now if I wanted to shift this graph 90 degrees to the right, what I'm going to do with each of those kind of key points is I'm literally going to move them all 90 to the right. So this one that was at 0, 0 would now move to 90, 0. This one that was at the top, move it 90 degrees to the right. It now is going to shift over to 180. This one that was at 180, I'm going to move over to 270. The one was at 270, moves over to 360, and it goes off the graph a little bit, so this 361 would move over to here, which would be to 90 degrees past that. So here's one cycle then of my final sine curve moved over. Okay, that was an easy one. Some of you said, well, I could have done that without all your markings. Yeah, I know that one you probably could do with all the markings, but I kind of wanted to model what you're doing, because now what if I have to move things, for instance, up or down? Okay. Let's take a look at our next one, and you just probably, I know maybe you might have to flip back and forth to our first page. So just want to be clear here, because sometimes it's confusing. Let's go ahead and put a parentheses around the theta. If this curve is written like this, the 2 doesn't go with the theta, the 2 is on the back side, okay? So the amplitude of this one is 3. I guess I said I should do the period, and then I'll do my graphing bit. The period, is there anything in front of the theta? So what would the period be then? 360. And then the vertical shift is down 2. Okay. So when you are graphing, though, even though I listed it last, what you want to do is graph the vertical shift first, okay? So if this graph is shifting down 2, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to graph my midline, and my midline is going to be, we'll use each tick mark, okay? I'll use 1s this time. The midline is now going to be at -2. This is -1, -2, -3, -4. I actually have to go down a little bit here. Okay, step 2 on my list from the previous page. If I find the amplitude, which is 3, and let's dashed lines 3 above the midline and 3 below the midline. So if I went 3 up from the midline, that would be, we're going to do a dashed line at 1. So that's how high my curve is going to go. And then where should the dashed line below go? The amplitude is 3 from the midline. So it should go down to -5, and that just gives me, hey, that's where my highs and lows are going to be of my graph. Okay. Step 3, identify the period. The period is 360. So I'm going to put the 360 up here, but when we're graphing it, you kind of got to remember it's down here. So I'm going to put my 360 on here. And then that means that these tick marks are 90, 180, 270. Okay. So next, I'm going to, well, it says identify the period. I'm going to sketch the graph just so you realize, is there any phase shift on this one? No. So at the end, I'm not going to need to move it, so we can go ahead and graph it with our final color if you want. We don't have to sketch it. If I'm graphing a cosine curve, where should I start at 0? Normally it starts at its top, right? Where's the top of our curve though? Is this top dashed line. So I'm going to start my cosine curve then up here. Now we're going to graph, but this, instead of our x-axis, we're going to use this midline, okay? So then at 90, it goes to the midline. This is like my x-axis now. Then it's going to go down to its minimum. So now it's going to go down to -5. It's going to come back up to the midline. And then up to its top. So the cosine curve looks like that. Okay. How we doing? You're off quiet. And then finally, I don't think I put it. Did I put an example for it? No, then I did practice. The doozy. Whoa. We got everything in there. Let's try this one. Okay, let's find all our things first. So amplitude is equal to 3. This time I have that 2 in front. So the period is 360 divided by 2, which is 180. There is a phase shift of 180. And a vertical shift of up 4. Okay. So let's start with the vertical shift. Would you go ahead and graph a midline up 4? Oh no. I'm going to go off my grid. That's okay. We're going to extend this up in a little bit. So we're going to graph our midline at 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be at the top here. So my midline now is right there. Okay. The amplitude is 3. So this curve, the max and min, let's do some dashed lines. So if this is 4, 1, 2, 3 up from there, there needs to be a dashed line at 7, please. And then another dashed line below this at 1. And that's going to be my minimum. Okay. So as I'm graphing this one, the phase shift or the period is 180. So you can handle this a couple different ways if you want. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just still use my tick marks. And I am going to put 180 on the end, which means my tick marks are going to all be 45s. Okay. And I'm going to lightly, because I have a phase shift going on, I'm going to lightly graph what this curve would be before the phase shift. So where does the sine curve start? In the middle, right? So this is going to start at its midline. At 45, it's going to go up to its max. At 90, it's going to go back to the midline. At 135, it would go down here. And then at 180, it would come back. So this is a sketch of the sine curve before the phase shift. Okay. So, quick question for you. If I moved all of these points over 180, what would happen? So where does this curve start over again? Doesn't it start over again at 180? So if I moved this to 180 and that to after it and that to after that and so on, I'm not going to even add those there. Did the graph really change at all? No. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw my curve through what's given to me. If you want to try to continue it on a little or show what goes on, that's fine. But the curve, if a phase shift of 180 didn't change it at all. If you shift something by its period, it's going to be the same curve. Okay, so your graph you can go ahead and fill in. Alrighty.